Welcome to the World of Eora, a news and lore podcast about the Pillars of Eternity games, as well as Obsidian Entertainment's upcoming release, Avowed. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the World of Eora. I'm your host, Eric, aka Gingerino. Thanks guys for joining me on another episode today as we dive into the history, lore, and game mechanics of Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2 as we gear up for the release of Avowed. For those wondering, why do we pair Avowed and Pillars of Eternity together? It's because they share the same fantasy setting known as Eora, hence the name of the show. And so we're going to prepare and hype up for Avowed as it undergoes development by taking a look at two great games, Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2, and the lore within. As well, if you're just into those two games, is an opportunity to dive into the lore, hear something new, and just geek out about the stuff that we already love. In my last episode, I had mentioned about the hurt wrists I have, which are like tendinitis or maybe arthritis. I don't know what it is. Anyways, I didn't receive any complaints about the way I did my last episode, which was recorded in pretty much one go. So I'm going to try to do that again today. Maybe no one sent me an email because they didn't make it through to the part where I asked you to send me feedback. Who knows? But if you don't like the new way that I'm approaching these episodes, which is to just kind of record it and go because editing hurts my wrists after a while, let me know. I want to get feedback from everybody for how things should be done. Maybe I can get someone else to help me out with it. In today's episode, let's getting into the episode we're going to be talking about the monk class found in Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2 and kind of discussing what that might look like in Avowed, as well as some of the orders that we see within the world that we know already. This was a request that was brought in to me a while ago, I think with someone on Reddit, and I have been putting it off for a while because honestly, I don't know a lot about monks. I've never been attracted to the monk class. Not that I think it's bad, I just always end up jumping into one of the other classes, and then when I do a monk playthrough of a game like this, it's pretty superficial. I'll admit that. That's my shame. Whatever. Anyways, but diving into the lore, there's actually quite a lot here. And while maybe the person who requested this might know a lot of the information that's here, perhaps there'll be some nuance to that. But yeah, so we're going to be talking about the monk class today. Not a lot of news to go over regarding Pillars of Eternity or Avowed, but if you've been paying attention to the Avowed subreddit or to anything Avowed related on Twitter, you might have noticed that there's been an image that's been surfaced, and it originates, I believe, from Jez Corden, who is over at windowscentral.com. He also posted a lot of the leaks about, this game being played in the Living Lands and all that. This image that's produced is apparently from an early build of Avowed, and the image features a first-person perspective from what would be the player character, dual-wielding a magical ability of some sort. So the hands are outstretched, and the fingers are in a formation. I believe that the hands, they almost look symmetrical. Like it looks like the right hand is mirroring the left hand, and it's got those purple circles around their hand, just like you see in the Avowed reveal trailer. And this person is casting this ability while standing in some sort of wooded area. The area looks consistent with the Deerwood. It could be consistent with the Living Lands. It's definitely not something you would see in the Deadfire Archipelago or the White That Wends. Probably... Well, maybe part of a deer. A deer, which is another area in the world of Eora, can be a little more tropical, but it's a huge island, or it's a huge continent, apparently, so perhaps there could be more of this, like, Rocky Mountain type environment, but I guess it's not Rocky Mountain, but, so more trees, less tropical. Anywho, probably not the Deadfire or White That Wends, that's for sure, which no one was really suspecting anyway. So that's an image that's been floating around. I don't know if it's legit, and I don't even know if that is just something that they were testing things with, or if that is supposed to reflect the environment or reflect the actual character interaction, like dual-wielding magic. It might not even be dual-wielding. It might just be you cast an ability, and this person has two hands on the screen to cast this one ability, but whatever. Anyways, check that out. It's floating around Reddit and Twitter if you're looking for Avowed stuff. And yeah, that's pretty much it. With that said, let's dive into today's episode talking about the lore of the monk class in Pillars of Eternity.
I'm curious. What exactly did you find there?
So I'm going to be getting a lot of information from the Pillars of Eternity Strategy Guide, which is the official book meant to guide you through the first Pillars of Eternity game, all the items you can find, all the quests that you can do, and such like that. We're going to be getting a lot of information from there. And I'm going to supplement it with the Pillars of Eternity fandom Wikipedia, which has a lot of information in there. The monk page on the fandom article has got to be one of the best pages for game information. Like, everything I want is pretty much in there. So that's going to be what I supplement this stuff with. We're going to go through some of the official descriptions, what a monk is, how the monk works as game mechanics. We're going to take a look at some of the orders, these monastic orders that you can see within the game. As well, we'll be taking a look at some of the ones we don't see in the game, but you can find within the lore itself, if you're paying attention. And then after that, we'll talk about Avowed. So, first off, we're going to talk about the class of monk. What is the class of monk? Well, if you are loading up the game for the first time, and you are like, well, what class am I going to pick? And you're picking between the list, and you highlight monk, you get a description. Now, you can also read this description on page 11 of the strategy guide. And so this is, if you're brand new to this world, this is what Obsidian wants you to know a monk is. Monks are warriors that believe in the philosophy of flesh mortification. They absorb a portion of incoming damage and convert it into capital W wounds. These can be used as soul-based abilities. These can be used to power soul-based abilities through their weapons. They are melee focused but have a pretty wide variety of single target and group attacks. So there you have it. That's the very quick description that Obsidian gives you for what a monk is. And without really telling you, they give you a lot of the gamey aspects of it as well. Whenever you're playing any of these classes, the question comes up is like, how do these classes generate their abilities? How do they power these special features that they have, then these abilities that they can use when they're fighting? And some classes have different ways of doing it. We talked about the Cypher before, who, when they inflict damage upon other people, get a little bit of that damage back in the form of like soul energy. We've talked about, I believe, the Chanter and how they just are chanting while they're in combat, and that just constantly gives them a little bit of basically magical power. We're going to put it in those terms. The monk generates their ability power, which is called wounds, through the way of having pain inflicted upon them. So that's how you generate your ability pool power, is by taking damage, essentially. And they allude to that in this one little description here. But we're going to get more into the meat and potatoes of it right away. Further into the book, around page 84, when this book is talking about classes and their overviews, we actually get to see the monk themselves. And so in this page from monk, we have the lore for monks, the overview, and then some of the starting abilities, which I can go over. And here's what it says as it introduces monks in this book. Monks are resilient fighters, capable of ignoring damage or even channeling their damage into powering their abilities. They have an array of effects to bolster the effect of their melee attacks, protect the monk from afflictions, or turn the tables on the attackers. Most monk abilities are powered by wounds, but some simply have per encounter or per rest use. Okay, so this is kind of just a general description of the type of character that you would be playing in the game itself. They're good fighters. They take damage, makes them more powerful, and they kick ass. It's pretty much what monks do. I'm going to go over the overview first and then jump into the lore of it, about what the origins of monks are, and then we can kind of break down how this works. So where monks come from in the Pillars of Eternity world is centuries ago, one man founded the fighting monastic disciplines. So there's one guy, apparently, who started this whole monkey thing. He was an old warrior who had knocked on death's door many times and endured numerous periods of captivity and torture. He discovered a method of mentally focusing on his pain to invoke power from his soul. When he left the service of his lord, he devoted his time to developing these techniques and teaching them to other warriors. He believed that mortification of the flesh not only made warriors more powerful, but that it strengthened the souls of its practitioners, making it more likely that their souls would remain intact, in other words, not fragment, when they died. Okay, so that's just one half of this overview here. Let's kind of take a step back. So there's a dude a long time ago, and he gets punched in the face a lot, and he started to recognize that, like, hey, if I channel this pain basically into my soul, it makes my soul stronger. And so he noticed this correlation and I guess made the logical conclusion that, if I purposely inflict pain, or if I don't avoid suffering, I can channel this into my soul and actually make myself stronger. There's something about the experience of suffering or pain on the souls in these world that can strengthen them for whatever reason. Which is a really interesting thing to get into. If you start to get into like philosophy or theology in our real world, there's a lot of discussion on being able to handle suffering and how, while suffering sucks and you shouldn't pursue it necessarily, at least in my opinion, there's a lot of benefits to suffering. Like, it can make you a more patient person if you allow it to grow you that way. It can give you more wisdom, and like, there's a lot of things that suffering can do that have benefits. That doesn't mean you should necessarily do what these monks do and inflict suffering upon yourself. But if you let it, there are positive benefits that can come out of it. And there's a lot of self-help stuff, and there's a lot of groups of people, I suppose, that will kind of talk about that. And this is kind of alluding to that, because even in this world, this fictional world, pain and suffering is something that can bolster the soul in some way, shape, or form, despite the fact that it is still pain and suffering. And in this last part, where it says that the souls would remain intact, the thing you got to know about this world is that it runs on a cycle of reincarnation. And so any person that dies, their soul leaves their body, and then it goes away to the underworld, basically. And then it comes back later on. But that process of leaving the body and then it being in the afterlife and then coming back, the souls in these worlds, they kind of get fragmented. They kind of get worn out. It's called entropy when you follow the god Remergond. And it's kind of like how a stream of water will very slowly and surely erode a large rock and cut it down and make, huge caverns and all that. So as the soul is constantly going through this process, little bits of it is getting broken off at periods of time. And this is called fragmenting of the soul. And this man believes that you could actually stave off fragmentation of your soul through channeling pain into it, making it stronger. He advocated fighting with bare fists and without armor to emphasize a fighting monk's personal suffering. Because the founder of these disciplines was old when he began teaching and died only a few decades later, there are now many different monastic orders. Some are more secluded, some are mendicant travelers, and some are mercenaries. They all tend to believe, like their founder, that combat is the ideal path for pursuing their particular brand of mortification of the flesh. Some choose to pursue this in a dedicated service. Some become mercenaries or assassins, and others devote their lives to dangerous wandering and exploration. There are other groups that also practice mortification of the flesh, but they are not quote-unquote fighting monks. So this last half of this paragraph here basically starts off by saying that he advocates that people should, if they're going to be a monk, and he's specifically a fighting monk. He started this monastic discipline, but it's about combat. It's about martial arts. And he thinks that you should fight without armor and in your bare fist because it promotes the most suffering to your body, which you can then use to channel more strength and defeat your enemies. That's kind of the whole point there. So it's living out I guess you would say he's kind of min-maxing himself essentially. He's just like, how can I endure the most suffering as possible to have as much strength as humanly possible is what this guy is asking. From this one guy, a lot of monastic orders have come about, apparently because he only lived a few decades. So a lot of like fringe orders were able to come out, a lot of which do this thing called mortification of the flesh, which is like a set of 4 words that get said a lot in these monk descriptions. And the whole concept behind mortification of the flesh is what we've basically been talking about. You mortify your flesh, you hurt yourself, you allow yourself to have suffering, and it makes you stronger. That's what that concept is. And some people have even done this through non-fighting means, so subjecting themselves to pain on a ritualistic sense. So they might wake up in a temple somewhere, and every day they go out to your I don't know, the super holy torture machine, and you do your 2 hours of self-torture, and then you go out and pray or something, whatever they do. I don't know what these monks would do, but either way, they're not fighting monks. They don't go out and they fight people. They inflict pain upon themselves, or they suffer in some ritualistic way, and that's how they mortify their flesh. You gotta love an episode about this nerdy, geeky stuff where you get to say things like mortification of the flesh. I love death metal, and so this is really just tickling me in the ways that I need. Now, I should have said that. Oh well. Lore. The lore for a monk. So this is a separate section on the same page. Monks belong to a variety of fighting orders that have sprung up in Ixamitl, Ixamitl. I still don't know how to pronounce that. That's a region in the Eastern Reach continent. or fighting orders have sprung up in Exadamil and the Eastern Reach over the past few centuries. While many monastic orders can trace their teachings to the enduring founder, Tletac, T-L-E-T-A-C, which is probably this one guy we were talking about earlier, individual orders may vary greatly in their focus, morality, and ethics. Common folk respect the incredible discipline of monks, but see them as odd, unpredictable bunch who may not be entirely sane. Even mercenaries and other adventurers aren't sure what to make of them. This last part I can kind of relate to. I don't know if anyone's ever seen or heard of it, but or maybe this might have just been in a movie, but I think it was inspired by a real life event. Was this monk somewhere else in the world, from where I am obviously, that lit themselves on fire to make a message, and they, to the point of death, like they burnt themselves alive in a public place. I think that was the story. I can't remember exactly. And I remember thinking kind of like what they're saying here of like, I have to like be in awe of this incredible discipline. Like, who can light themselves on fire and then just calmly sit on the street corner until the point that you die? Like, that's not something I think most people can or necessarily should do. But still, like, you have to be a little bit awestruck by a person's ability to be able to do that in the first place. That is, to endure that suffering and not flinch at it. Me personally, I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think it's good when someone lights themselves on fire, even for a positive message. I don't know the whole story, so I'm not going to criticize it or anything like that. But still, you have to be a little bit awestruck. But like it says here in this one half of this paragraph, that people are like, they're odd and an unpredictable bunch who may not be entirely sane. That's also kind of how I felt. I was like, that's really incredible, but also that's kind of bonkers, and I don't know how I feel about it. So that's the lore behind monks. And so we've talked about the overview of monks and the lore of monks and how they kind of work. We got their gamey aspects down. So as you take X amount of damage, you gain X amount of capital W wounds. And that is your power pool. So you use wounds to perform monk abilities. Now, when you start off as a monk, you get two things called Transcendent Suffering and Wounds. Transcendent Suffering is basically when you have no weapons equipped, your unarmed attacks are more powerful. Then wounds are, as monks takes damage, their pain generates them, which allows you to use special abilities. Some special abilities might be things like we have the Flagellant's Path, which is something you can get at level 11, and it says, moves the monk with blinding speed towards their target, striking every enemy within 2 meters, ignoring engagement, disengagement, blah, 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 a bunch of gamey stuff. So by allowing this monk to have themselves hurt, going through pain and suffering, they gain this ability called Flagellant's Path. And they basically move super quick. They move super quick and they get to ignoring engagement or opportunity attacks or something like that. So, and this is an example of how monks work. They get hit a lot in the face, hurts a bunch, they channel that pain into their soul, and then they just move really quickly because they're using this energy that is contained within their soul, which is housed within their body, and to do this kind of cool thing. When you start to think about the things that a monk can do just from enduring pain, it's a pretty badass kind of person when you get down to it, and I'm really actually quite impressed by it. Now, when you start getting into this monk classes, you might ask yourself, what different monastic orders are there? In Pillars of Eternity 1, when you pick the monk class, I believe all you can do is pick the one monk class, and that's it. But in Pillars of Eternity 2, Deadfire, that's Annunciation for you guys, you have subclasses to choose from. So you pick the monk class to play the game with, and then it says, what kind of monk do you want to be like? And there are 4 subclasses to choose from, or you can just pick no subclass. That way you don't have to worry about the bonus/penalty thing. But the 4 subclasses we get here are Hellwalker, Nalpashka, or Nalpazka, depending on how you're reading it, Shattered Pillar, and Forbidden Fist. A 5th subclass called Sister of the Reaping Moon is exclusive to one of your companions, Jodi, so you learn a bit about that monastic order through her. There are a couple of other monastic orders that you can read about in the lore, but you can't be one yourself. There are monastic orders everywhere, but you only get to see a handful of them throughout the gameplay and the lore. But theoretically, there are a lot more of them running around, and potentially you might see some more in Avowed. We don't have a lot of information about each of these monastic orders. It's just sort of the general description that they have for it. But the Nalpazka order, or the Nalpazha, no, it's that would be Nalpazka. That's right. The Nalpazka order is the monastic order that one of your companions in the first game can be, which is Zawa from the White March DLC. And so we know a little bit more about that order, and a couple of others from the lore, which I'll read about later. But let's go through this in order, ending with Nalpazka for these 4 subclasses. Hellwalker. All Hellwalkers undergo a ceremonial death rite as part of their initiation. Yikes. The experience allows them to start combat with extra wounds and to draw physical strength from their wounds at the cost of increased vulnerability. So the bonus is you begin combat more wounds. Hellwalker monks gain might for each wound they have, so they're stronger. They start off with more wounds, which they can use for abilities, and those wounds generate stronger attacks. The penalty, however, is they take more damage for the amount of wounds they have. So they've been weakened in a way. They've been physically weakened by the fact that they had to die. So that's what a Hellwalker is. These are monks that undergo an initiation rite of dying, so that they carry with them this kind of like base level pain. You just get to start off with wounds. You just have wounds everywhere you go. You just always have a little bit of wounds because you basically went to the underworld and came back. It's kind of what they're going for here. That is some crazy level dedication. Like, can you imagine that? Like, joining a monastic order and based off the idea that if you hurt yourself, you can become stronger. And some people are like, okay, well, let's take this as far as we can go. Let's kill ourselves, but to the point where you come back, where you like don't actually fully die, but you just die for a little bit or something like that. That is, monks are dedicated, man. I'll give them that. That is extreme. But there you go. And now you get a little bit bonus from that. Next up, Shattered Pillar. Unlike other monastic orders, monks of the Shattered Pillar philosophy gain power from causing pain and harm. While not inherently sadistic, the order does attract many practitioners who delight in the suffering of others. So they gain wounds by melee weapon damage inflicted, which doesn't count the abilities that you use. But the penalty, however, is they can't gain wounds from damage received. And then there's a couple other gamey things that aren't really related. So these are almost like ciphers in a way, except you're not using mental powers, you're using monk powers. So if you're like, I don't want my character to have to inflict wounds, I don't want to have to constantly balance taking damage and keeping you healthy, I just want to like punch people hard and take as little damage as possible, Shattered Pillar might be the way to go. The people of this monastic order, they use the pain and sufferings of other people to kind of gain that soul energy that they infuse within themselves. Unlike the cipher, which uses a soul whip, which is more of an ethereal connection, these monks, basically, you probably should be up close and personal, but I'm sure it would work. No, it says melee weapon, so you do have to be up close and personal for this. These monks, they punch people in the face, and the pain kind of gets absorbed in their fist and comes back in their bodies, is a way you can think about that. So that's the Shattered Pillar. It's interesting to see how you can, I don't understand how this works in this world. It's just sort of, magic fantasy stuff where you can channel energy into your soul. I don't know how you do that. Like, you just think really hard about it? Do you concentrate on it? Do you utter words? Is it just a reflexive thing that they understand in this world because we don't have it in this world? I don't know. But there you go. So that's a Shattered Pillar. Next is Forbidden Fist. Followers of cryptic teachings rooted in a dark past. These monks are among a few granted, or cursed, with knowledge of forbidden techniques. Their martial prowess was said to corrupt the very soul of the wielder, believing that great and terrible events justify their use. These monks travel Eora, weighting the balance between the purity of their soul and the necessity of conflict. Essentially, the Forbidden Fist, they have this secret knowledge, they have these secret techniques, they know how to do the 5-finger death punch. But here's the thing. They know how to do super cool punching and kickings, but these super cool punchings and kickings not only hurt the person you're hitting, obviously, but the very use of them scar your soul a little bit. It makes you a little darker. It not only does it inflict wounds on you physically, the pain and suffering in your soul, but it actually darkens you a little bit. So there's like a little bit more suffering involved, I guess you could say. There's more damage being done in a way. It's almost like in Harry Potter, where if you use any one of the forbidden curses that can kill or torture people. It turns your soul dark on the inside. I haven't read the book, so I don't exactly know how it works, but I know they mentioned in the movies. Please don't crucify me for being a movies guy over a book guy in this particular instance. Sometimes that happens. But yeah, anyways, this is the Forbidden Fist. Through forbidden knowledge, forbidden techniques, they can inflict more damage, but they are hurting their very soul in the process, but which allows them to wield these very strong attacks. The next monastic order is the last of the 4 that you can have as a monk subclass in Pillars of Eternity 2. This is Nalpazka. The Nalpazka are an order of monks who meditate on difference between material world and the perceived world through the use of mind-altering substances. And if any of you have played the White March DLCs in Pillars of Eternity 1 and followed Zawa's side quests, you know kind of a little bit about this. It's a fun time. If you haven't already done his side quests, I really recommend it. It's a trippy time. Originating in Aximitil, the Nalpazka are respected in their homelands, but often disregarded as fools when traveling abroad. Their extensive dabbling with the boundaries of reality can give others the impression that they are addled, or simply insane. So, bonus to these monks, their drug effects last longer, and they generate wounds while receiving the bonus of drugs. So basically, if you do drugs, good things happen to you. Penalty, however, is essentially you crash from the drugs, and your wounds degenerate when you're not on them. So you constantly have to be basically taking mushrooms in the game in order to generate wounds for your monk order. But when you do, oh boy, is it a ride. So that's Nalpazka order of monks. They're still following those monastic traditions of suffering, the mortification of the flesh. It makes your soul stronger, but through the use of, mind-altering substances, you can actually perceive the soul world a little better, which theoretically speaking, if what you're trying to do is channel pain into your soul, if you were able to take some sort of substance that allowed you to more easily interact with your soul, then you'd be more efficient at channeling that mortification into your soul. You'd be more efficient at channeling that strengthening effect from pain into your own soul. So that's kind of the idea, I think, behind these Nalpazkas. Instead of them focusing on how can we min-max our pain threshold so that we can do more damage to ourselves so that we can be stronger, these guys are more like, how can we make the transfer of pain into strength more efficient, right? So there you go. The Nalpazka is the order that Zawa belongs to. The other thing that we can learn about the Nalpazka is that they have these different practices. So we learn this from Zawa, essentially. There are 3 notable practices that the Nalpazka focus on for removing vanity, pleasure, and fear of death, and things that can cloud their mind the most. And that's what a monk would want to do. Because here's the thing. If you're going to live a life where you have to constantly inflict suffering upon yourself, I don't know if anyone out there has ever lived in a situation where you felt like you were stuck and trapped in just a cycle of suffering. It gets really hard to live a purposeful life sometimes like that, because you think to yourself, there's no escape from this, and life just has this darkness attached to it everywhere you go, and it can't go away. It's like an itch that never disappears, except the itch hurts a lot. Living this life that these monks are trying to live by, it's not just hard physically because you have to endure pain and suffering all the time. It's hard mentally and spiritually. It can really take you down. You have to have the mental and spiritual will to endure this entire lifestyle. And so things like vanity, pleasure, and fear of death, these are things that can kind of cause you to mentally spiral. Because if you're vain, if you're always focusing on yourself, then you're always going to focus on your suffering and how it has to do with you, and you're not going to be channeling that suffering into your soul to make you stronger. Pleasure, or more specifically, the loss of pleasure, can also do that, right? So living this monk lifestyle, you have to forego a lot of the pleasures of life, and that can be hard to give up, right? So vanity is tackled by embracing revulsion. So basically, instead of being going towards things that make you think you're great or beautiful or whatever, you tend towards things that are revolting to other people, which is really funny considering where you find Zawa when you first meet him. A monk must become loathsome and disgusting to all around him, offending all the senses. It is difficult to achieve in regions where Nalpazka monks are common, but far easier in areas such as the Deerwood, where a monk can throw up on the where a monk can throw up on the nobles to their heart's content and bask in the loathing they receive. The point is to liberate yourself from the way others view you or view yourself. So here we see what they're getting at, right? Like, if you're trying to maintain an image to people, if you're trying to constantly get the approval of people, that could take work, right? And even at a basic level, like if you just want to go out into society and not have people sneer at you as you walk down the streets, it's like you take a shower every once in a while at the very least, right? You put some form of clothing on that are all together or what have you. Even just basic amount of work. But if you want to be like loved and admired by everybody that you walk past, well, then you gotta put a lot more work into something like that. And that vanity is something that these monks are like, we're going to go the opposite way. Not only not going to pursue them, we're actually going to pursue the opposite direction just to make sure we don't accidentally fall into it. So it sounds like they will throw up on nobles. I imagine they probably smear themselves in feces or something like that. So this is how they tackle vanity, is embracing revulsion. It's an interesting tactic, and I see why they're getting at it. And there would be a liberation in some senses from that, if you can truly detach yourself, that is, from not having approval by anyone around you. Pleasure is countered by embracing discomfort and pain. The inventiveness of monks shows no bounds and typically includes some form of self-harm, scarification, sleeping in the most uncomfortable of places, or even purposeful mutilation. This, makes sense logically. Pleasure is, you have some sort of stimulation that you enjoy. You do something that brings you happiness, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, I guess sort of. These guys probably get some sort of weird joy out of the fact that they're hurting themselves and that therefore they're not receiving pleasure. But the idea behind it is that you go towards the opposite. Just like vanity goes towards revulsion instead, pleasure go the opposite, discomfort and pain. Pleasurable things are comfortable things, and they are non-painful. They are a joy to receive. You like feeling the pleasure. So if instead you go the opposite direction towards discomfort and pain, there you go. Now you are not embracing pleasure. Fear of death is conquered by confronting it. Now Pascha monks will bury themselves in the ground and meditate for days among the dead, even allowing carrion eaters to burrow in their flesh. Some masters, like Zawas, would further reinforce their point by burrowing their students in mass graves. Wow. So basically, just surrounding yourself by death, constantly keeping it in mind, probably embracing a circle of life mental mental state would help you out here. So basically, you just confront death everywhere you go. You don't ever let yourself forget it. You learn to live with the truth of it, and that is going to happen to you. That's how they confront that. So I know I'm talking about this and I'm trying to have as positive a voice I can, because this is some pretty dark stuff. I don't condone this, by the way, anyone listening. I'm not trying to be judgmental on people that want to live alternative lifestyles or that are trying to embrace different ways of approaching vain or pleasure. I really don't want people out there to hurt themselves or scar themselves. So this stuff hurts my soul to read. It probably hurts your soul to hear. So I'm sorry about that. But I mean, this is a fantasy group of people, and this is how they embrace this style of living. So there is the now Paschas. That's the last of the 4 subclasses you can be in Pillars of Eternity. Have fun role-playing that in a D&D session and scaring all your friends. That'd be a great time. Now, let's get into some of the other monastic orders that we hear about through other means. The first being the Sister of the Reaping Moon. This is a short one. So if you have Jyoti, who is a companion in the second game, you will learn about this. This is a monastic order of Gon, which is the other side of the god Aethys. Aethys is the god of light and redemption and dusk and dawn and all that stuff. We can get into him another time. There's the other side of the coin of Aethys is Gon. The reaping aspect of Aethys. Sisters of the Reaping Moon are most effective against opponents who are already at death's door. And that's really all that we have for the lore of it. We know that Jyoti, being the person that she is, likes to harbor souls into her lantern, and so that might have something to do with it. But she also could be a priest and not a monk, so hard to say. But they essentially, these Sisters of the Reaping Moon monks, they follow Gon. And are very good at killing people who are about to die. Now, going back to the strategy guide, actually, we can learn about a few more. There is this one item you can get. It's called Purgatory. It is a unique saber, a type of blade that you can get in the game. And when you look at the item description for Purgatory, you can read the story of this monastic order. And so this is what the lore for this item says. In a monastery overlooking Cold Flow Lake from the foothills of the White March, which is an area just outside the Deerwood, which is the setting for the first game, there once resided a clandestine order of monks known as the Thousand Dreams. So that's another monastic order we know of, the Thousand Dreams. Through a powerful form of pain-inducing meditation, these monks were able to walk through their past lives as though they were dreams. Each traversed these memories in ultimate hopes of achieving complete understanding of his or her soul's identity. Let's stop and take a look at what that means here. So I mentioned how there's a cycle of reincarnation in this world, and that would kind of imply that your soul has lived previous lives in this world. Now, a question might rise in your mind: how can I view or experience those previous lives? Perhaps to learn from them or just have a fun time. Who knows? These monks are using some powerful form of pain-induced meditation to be able to live those experiences as if they were dreams. This opens the door to so much possibility within the lore of this world. And it's actually, if you're playing D&D or any form of tabletop role-playing games that is set in this world, this is an idea or a concept to really wrap your head around in order to come up with some cool adventures or a unique faction or some ways of getting across story beats or explaining the lore behind things. So keep that in mind if you're doing anything like that. And I often wonder to myself, if you know anything about the Ingwithan people that you learn about from Pillars of Eternity 1, I'm not going to say any spoilers, but if you've played Pillars of Eternity 1 and you know the whole story and you know that the Ingwithan people were looking into basically the origins of life, they were trying to find out like what happened at the very beginning of souls, etc., etc. Or that might be one way they were trying to go about their research way back in the day. I wonder if this is something that they utilized, the Ingwithan people. I wonder if this is how they might have done it. Each person traversed these memories in ultimate hopes of achieving complete understanding of his or her soul identity. They believed after experiencing 1,000 lifetimes, total enlightenment could be attained. Greatest of their sect was Rigolan, who had an ancient soul and was said to have walked more lifetimes than any other. But when she came to the end of all her lifetimes and found that there was no more to experience, it became clear that she would never come to know herself completely, for there was simply not enough to learn from. Unable to accept this fate after her endless trials, Rigolan sought a way to take the experiences of others for her own, that she might reach 1,000 lifetimes yet. She channeled her unquenchable hunger into her favorite sword, the Sword of Purgatory. And it became an instrument of her will. With it, she claimed many lives in the surrounding area. Each drop of blood on her blade was a new experience, each killing blow a new lifetime for her to claim. When the rest of the Thousand Dreams came to learn of her actions, they banded together and confronted Rigolan upon her return to the temple. In the end, amid a courtyard of slain monks, she did indeed come to understand her soul, and it is said that among the many experiences contained in the blade are all those of Rigolan herself. So there you have the lore behind this sword, which essentially is imbued with the very will of this person and the very experiences of the souls of not just her, but everyone else. And so that tells you of some of how the soul mechanics in this world work, that you can actually transfer memories through even just drops of blood. You can look at previous lives of other people. It's crazy that something like that can happen. That when you really think about how intense that actually is, and how someone like this could just make a sword that does that? Like, that's crazy. How do you just do that? How do you make a sword that's like, oh yeah, I can look at your 1,000 lives that your soul has lived through by giving you a good old slice? I wonder if you do have to actually take the life of the person, if that's required, or if you can just have the blood. I imagine you do have to take the life and then kind of like take some of that leaving essence as the soul leaves the body. I imagine that's part of it. But there you go, Purgatory, which talks about another monastic order, the Thousand Dreams, and how they wander their dreams of their previous lives. And apparently you can use a sword to do that for other people. The next is a story about a particular monk who we don't know what order he belonged to, but he was there for the war against Saint Widwin, which is something we've talked about before regarding the Deerwood. All you need to know is that it's a religious war between Rayed Saris and Deerwood. This armor, which is called He Carries Many Scars, was forged in honor of the Rayed Sarin monk Rugnfar, who came to believe that as long as no enemy could inflict more pain upon him than he could upon himself, he could never truly be subjugated by anyone. Conscripted by his governments to quell the uprising inspired by St. Widwin, Rugenfar became a frightful presence in the battlefield. For every injury he sustained at the hands of an enemy, he would inflict one twice as severe, drawing strength from the pain that enabled him to fight through the injuries that would have caused anyone else to collapse on the ground. I'm not going to go through this entire lore because it's a little bit extensive, but here's the thing that we're kind of noticing is that these monks are trying to undergo the mortification of the flesh philosophy. But there's a problem. People don't like being hurt. So how do you overcome that? This guy is like, okay, well, to avoid being afraid of being hurt by others, I'm going to hurt myself more every time. So that way, anytime he gets punched in the face by someone else, he's like, whew, that was nothing. Watch this. And he punches himself twice as hard. You know, in a way, I can see the logic behind it. You would definitely avoid getting punched as much by other people. So you'd be pretty good on the battlefield, probably avoiding attacks from people. But yeah, like this is the constant battle that these monks have to go through, I would imagine, is like, how do you embrace this way of living? Because it's so painful and your body and soul naturally is going to avert itself from these kind of experiences. The last one we're going to talk about is a item called Blood Testament. It's a set of gloves that are only usable by monks in the First Pillars of Eternity game, and it talks about one more monastic order. A monk from the Abbey of the Cloven Wheel mastered suffering by taxing her body to its limits each day. Ugh. Such was her discipline that her sensitivity to pain and her ability to redirect it reached heights previously unknown in her order. Following her death in battle, the fellows of the abbey gave her bloodied hand bandages a place of honor in their great hall. An unknown thief stole the bandages along with several other relics in 2802 AI. Since then, the wrappings have circulated amongst various monks of different orders. Okay, so here you have something that I was curious about, which is essentially like, could you get used to pain and suffering? Like, could you just eventually get to the point where it doesn't bother you as much, but it's still doing the thing that you're trying to do as a monk? And apparently this person who is in the Abbey of the Cloven Wheel, it sounds like she basically did that. She brought her body to its limits each day, and she basically got to the point where she could endure great suffering and pain and just sort of like endure it. You know, it'd be like, oh, this is normal. But it would still do what it needed to do by redirecting it into her soul. So good that, she basically walked anything off. And it sounds like she became almost like a saint in this Abbey of the Cloven Wheel. So there we go. There is one other monk order that I do want to draw attention to, but I don't want to include the spoilers that come along with it. And you find them in the White March DLC for the first game. And these are from the Abbey of the Fallen Moon, which is a location that you have in the White March DLC. And you can interact with a lot of the NPCs in this area. And you learn that there's a monk order there that consists of two parts, the high and low tides. The monks of this order follow the goddess Andra, which is the goddess of forgetfulness. That's the important part anyways for this monk order. And long story short, there is we're going to call it a cycle of suffering between the high tide and the low tide classes in this monk order that honor Andra's aspect of forgetfulness and in a very unique way. I don't want to get into the bits and pieces of it in case you want to play it for yourself. But yeah, essentially the high tide and low tide are finding ways to erase their memories and then deal with it in a unique way. And that's a different form of suffering. We don't know anything about their mortification of the flesh. This is just some unique way that they honor the goddess Andra. So it's a little different than what we've been talking about up to this point. But yeah, I just wanted to point them out because, this is the monk episode. That is everything that I have from the research I've done and from whatever playthroughs I remember about monks. I'm going to be honest, I am surprised that I was able to go on as long as I was about this kind of stuff. I'll probably have to chew the fat out of a lot of this recording just to make it under an hour. But there you have it. There are some monks. For those who are interested in monk classes and monk orders and subclasses and all that kind of stuff, I hope this has been an enjoyable episode for you. If there's anything I've missed, I want you to get a hold of me, and I'll leave my socials at the end of this episode for you to be able to say, hey, you missed this, or, oh, this thing needs to be corrected. So I can only do so much research, so I appreciate your guys' help. Now, with this all said, let's ask the question of what does this have to do with Avowed?
is an oath worth the weight of a crown.
So the obvious side of all this is that, well, we might be able to be monks in Avowed. It's very possible. We don't know necessarily what the character creation is going to be in Avowed. It might be that we get to choose our race, we get to choose our class, and we get to choose a whole bunch of other stuff. It's also possible that Obsidian might prescribe for us our character. We might be a human paladin, and you don't get to choose anything else. But we don't really know. We have no idea. I suspect they'll let us choose something. I don't know if monk will be one of the classes they let us choose, but I suspect they'll let us choose some form of classes. And if we can choose a monk, then there's also the potential that we could choose one of these monk orders. So that's the obvious part of what could be in Avowed, is that you might play a monk. I don't know how well that would play in a first-person action RPG kind of game, just doing a lot of punching and kicking. You know, I don't know how well that translates game mechanics-wise or gameplay-wise, if it works very well or not. But who knows? Maybe it works really well. I don't know. I haven't played a ton of those kind of games yet. So there's that. And in playing a monk, I imagine that you would have to inflict pain upon yourself in the game, or that you would be able to choose options that allow you to endure suffering. You know, even if you're in like a conversation with someone and you just always say asshole-ish things to people, and then they don't like you, and so they smack you in the face, and then you gain a little bit of power. I don't know. So it'd be an interesting role play, as well as an interesting way to see the game mechanics played out. I imagine it would be particularly difficult to make this a playable class in a game like Avowed, but I don't know. I'm not a game developer. The other side of it, too, is that we can run into other people that are monks in the game, and so we might run into one of these monastic orders that we see in the lore. It could be one of the ones that we talked about from Pillars of Eternity, Deadfire, or it could be one of the ones that we only see in the lore, or it could be any other order that Obsidian just makes for the fun of it. You know, it could be anything else. And so it's who can say? Really, who can say what monastic order we might run into? A lot of the orders that we were talking about today are in the Deerwood area, which is, you know, potentially a place the game could be set in. But I know the rumors are mostly that it's in the Living Lands. I don't know what monk orders are in the Living Lands, if any. I'm sure there must be something. But yeah, that's about all we can say for Avowed, is that we might be able to play Avowed, which I'm not sure how that would work mechanically and role-playing wise. Or we can run into other people that are playing monk orders as well, and we don't know what orders those might be. But it would be interesting to see. I would really like to see something like that in Avowed, especially if it's just observing another order of monks and how they live, and whether or not there could be a side quest associated to either helping them with what they're doing or not. Because that would be an interesting side quest, in my opinion, if you approach this monk order and they're living this extreme lifestyle, which would probably be not attractive, possibly even revolting to most player characters, to be like, these people actually enjoy inflicting pain and suffering upon themselves, and they're asking me to help them do that. I don't know how I feel about that. So do you help them out? Do you help them get the weapons that'll hurt them more and rip their flesh apart and stuff like that? Or do you find ways to actually stop them from doing that and try to convince them that this is not a right way to live? That's kind of an interesting moral dilemma side quest that could typically be found in games. I'd be into that. I'd totally be into something like that. So there you go, Obsidian. There's a free idea for you. I'm sure you guys already have a million of great ideas over there, though, so I'm not too worried about it. But yeah, there we go, everybody. That's all we have for monks and what they might be like in Avowed. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Again, I'm looking for feedback on this new style of recording where it's just one long recording or just big sections of recording with minimal editing out of some of the fat because it hurts my wrists to do that. Or maybe I need to try a different approach. So if you want to get hold of me, you can reach me through my email, worldofeora@gmail.com. If I don't respond right away, it's just because I'm trying to take a break from computer stuff. Or you can follow me on Twitter @worldofeora. I only usually post updates on when shows are out, you know, like when this episode comes out, or if anything else is going on, like a new project. With that said, for those who have been following me on YouTube through my Gingerino42 channel, I have been posting a couple episodes for the Pillars of Eternity 1 Critical Path Let's Play series that I'm doing. 17 episodes of going through just the main story of Pillars of Eternity, talking about the lore, talking about the world. If you're listening to this, you're looking forward to Avowed, but you're not totally into Pillars of Eternity as a game itself, which I totally respect. Everyone has their tastes and flavors. That's fine. But check that out, Gingerino42 on YouTube, if that's something you're into, or if you have a friend that you know would be into something like that. Other than that, not a lot of new projects going on. With my wrist hurting, I'm hoping to get more into Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder and other role-playing games, so I'm working on trying to get a lot of information down for how to use Eora as a good D&D setting. Might put an episode about that out later. Might want to see if anyone's interested in playing a game on Roll20, but that's all just kind of in my head at the moment. I think that's going to be everything for today. Not sure if there's anything else I need to go over. If there is, whoops, I'm sorry. We'll talk about it next time, or I'll put a small episode out. Thank you, everyone, for joining me on today's episode where we talked about the monk class and the monastic orders that you can see and their history and weird way of living that they undergo. I hope it wasn't too dark and depressing for you. I hope you're okay. Maybe take a break. Maybe do it in chunks. It's kind of too late now if you're this far. But yeah, there you go. I've been your host, Eric, aka Gingerino. Thank you so much for being with me here today, and I'll see you guys next time.